Did this really blow up in their faces? As Man Tracker would say, this is quite a jackpot. Alva's really out of his element here. If he was experienced at this kind of thing, he would know the smartest thing to do would be to throw a handful of money up in the air and as the commotion breaks out, run away. Because it was just prior to the end of the last clip, which came in a really bad place to put a cut. Remember it in part 7. Who entered into the Countess's cabin just before Rodrigo and the Countess? But the little pimp. So whatever happened, he's at least an eyewitness, or possibly even involved in the skullduggery that happened. And Quast's plan to seduce the Countess here actually ranks with probably some of the very worst ideas in history. Because let's say even if the Countess was strictly dickly, I think even then his personality is so repulsive that if Quast tries to kiss her, she vomits in his mouth. Also, I wonder how he got out in the middle of whatever was happening in that room. There's no way the little pimp could have let himself out the door without the Countess seeing that he was there. These ship's cabins are usually so tiny that even in the dark, if he's not seen, he's gonna have a real difficult time getting through to the door without bumping into Rodrigo and the Countess. Whatever he does in the film, it shows he's already climbing into the lifeboat while the cops are knocking at or arrive at the Countess's door. Party of 6 now has been cut in half to a trio. Thanks to his blackmail attempt, Rodrigo Quast is now dead to Lulu, but the little pimp is still here. So whatever seems to happen, the little pimp always survives. He's like a cockroach. Now that the rat has left the sinking ship, this part of the film is really another one that reminds me of an episode of Survivor. At the beginning of Act 8, we're introduced to a mysterious stranger who gives away his very last cent to the Salvation Army Christmas band out of hopelessness and desperation. Okay, now we finally get to meet Jack. Including this character in this story suggests when this play was really written was probably around 1899, around the turn of the century. And the real Jack would have been, well, from the descriptions I've read, which describe him as approximately 27 years old in 1889 when he was really at his peak of his fame. So the real Jack in this film, which is actually set in 1929, which is the year it was released, he would have been an old man if it was the original Jack, because we're talking about 40 years of difference from the original prime of Jack. So he would actually, the real Jack, would actually be older than the little pimp. So he would not look as young and spry here as this Jack does. But we will see actually from Louise Brooks's explanation of Pabst's choice of this actor. There was one reason why Pabst chose this particular actor, Gustav Diesel, to play Jack in this film. Including Jack in this film, I think, suits a number of purposes. I guess the playwright considered him to be a good match for Lulu. I would also add, though, and I think this portrayal of Jack is different from the ones that I've seen in other films where he's not portrayed as a demon-possessed maniac or a monster, but someone with a mental illness or some kind of a compulsion that he can't control. This is the most sympathetic portrayal of this particular historical figure in any film that I've seen. Now, note also that this Jack is a pretty boy, so it's a little bit harder for Pabst to make him look sinister, and that may have influenced how Pabst decided to film these scenes. Someone as intelligent as Pabst would put Diesel's charisma to good use in these scenes instead of trying to work against it. Now, for some reason, this part of the film reminds me. Louise Brooks, according to the gossip, Hollywood gossip magazines, and even some of the videos about her on YouTube, suggest that in the 20s and 30s, only her and Bette Davis were the two actresses who had the most abortions. That when they would get pregnant went and they would need the services of Dr. Kilgood to get them out of trouble. I think from the 1920s until probably at least the early 1960s, Dr. Kilgood saved a lot of famous actresses' careers and kept the sordid reality of Hollywood in the shadows a secret. Louise explains in her biography that she was sexually abused at a very, very young age, and later in her adult years was very promiscuous. I think for her, sex was probably like shaking hands, because in Hollywood history, almost every beautiful, famous, or interesting person who was at her time of her career is linked to her that they may have had an affair. Here, by this act, Alva is the last sympathetic character left in this film, and he is suffering because he really loves Lulu. And we see through this part of the film, he chooses to suffer with her, and hear that his love for her really does cost him everything. He loses everything, and is destitute in England. Now, even though he loves her, I don't think Alva is so stupid that he actually believes he's going to somehow make Lulu into the perfect wife. This love that he has for her is like an addiction, and he loves her so much, I think he's willing to accept almost anything just to be with her. Alva probably loves Lulu the way I love Alison Goldfrapp. I understand that Alison Goldfrapp isn't the most intelligent or the kindest or most moral woman in the world. I love her because she's the most beautiful woman in the world. Alva has never experienced poverty or hunger before. Notice in this upcoming scene that Alva, who was previously a millionaire's son, is very, very depressed and demoralized now by his sudden lack of wealth, while Lulu seems to need very little adjustment to her new surroundings. After watching this particular scene with its real poverty and desolation, I'm gonna make what I call an educated guess and say that this is exactly what Lulu's childhood with Das Pimp would have been like. And even though the Pandora's Box is a silent film, I wanted to include a clip of Louise Brooks's voice, because I love Louise Brooks almost as much as Alison Goldfrapp. For her wardrobe in this scene, instead of using a costume that was made up, Pabs decided to destroy Louise Brooks's $250 blue suit that she had bought, and this cost $250 in 1928, so it would be equivalent to a $5,000 suit today. And here is Brooks herself explaining this.
It's the way he did things that was so amusing, because anyone else would have gotten some ragtag, bought something, dirty, but he wanted something that was mine and I loved, so that I would feel terrible in it, and I did. Here I was in my beautiful suit and it was ruined, so it made me feel like this, and that's how I was at the end of the picture.
And if you watch the video of her and Lulu in Berlin, even at 70 years old, when she was interviewed about playing Lulu in this film, she was still beautiful, and she still looked quite a bit like she did in 1929. One thing to make careful note of in this scene is it sure appears here where now Lulu and Alva are suffering, but the little pimp seems comfortable, and he seems almost as if he's enjoying their suffering. Notice in this scene that Alva and Lulu don't have winter coats, but the little pimp does, and he has a full bottle of pimp juice, his expensive booze. I also think that if this film hadn't been titled Pandora's Box, which was the title of the original play, I think another title Pabs could have chosen that would have been accurate would have been Das Pimp, because the little pimp is the real hero of the story if you follow the events all the way to the end of the film. So the pimp is the unseen hand operating behind Lulu's actions for the entire film. And this is almost like a Kubrick film, because it really suggests how a public figure, we'll say, could be manipulated by someone in the shadows without anyone else perceiving. And I think this in fact happens in our world very frequently, and many events that appear random are actually not. The important thing for us to realize is that the pimp has been in control the entire time, not Lulu. And she does what she does because he tells her to. Das Pimp. Now it's finally revealed that he's been in control the whole time. And until seeing this close-up view that started in Act 7, even after watching the previous events of the film, without seeing these parts, we would be completely unaware of this fact. Instantly, the previous events of the film make more sense. Also note that the little pimp, without the slightest hesitation, not only gave up his buddy Rodrigo to be sacrificed, but even led him like a lamb to the slaughter. Okay, the little pimp. I've been saving all this because, as I said, this part of the film exposes what's hidden throughout the entire film, that the little pimp has been the hero of this film the whole time. Anyway, I hate this character. I don't know exactly how it was written, but the way the actor Carl Getz, who plays the little Das Pimp, he chooses to play him like a clown. And actually, I think there's some real wisdom in this, even though the purpose of it may not have been what Carl Getz was intending. I think he just wanted to get laughs. But the reality is this character, because he does appear sort of harmless and weak and somewhat like a clown, it hides the reality of his true nature, which is he loves to cause chaos and destruction. And he is really evil. The difference between him and, say, Dr. Schoen is Dr. Schoen is selfish and he cares for nothing except what he can get for himself, where evil is just a byproduct of his apathy and carelessness and not his original intention. This character is far morally worse. He's far more morally deficient because he, instead of just seeking personal gain, his intention in the world is just to spread chaos and destruction, to destroy as many lives as he can. Basically, this character is Satan. He appears harmless and gets you to trust him and make a deal with him, and then he takes your soul to hell, which is basically what he does here with Lulu. Even the way this character seems he appears harmless and he acts like a clown shows how society likes to trivialize evil and trivialize Satan. But really, he's the one that's laughing at us when he gets what he wants at our expense, just like this little pimp. So throughout this film, when you see all the manipulation of each character trying to convince or manipulate the others, it asks who's the king of the jungle. Well, I think Das Pimp is the king of the jungle. He's the best predator and manipulator. And I've known real pimps, and they're just like this piece of So I think the portrayal or the writing of the character is actually pretty close to the truth. Note what the little pimp seems to say here is at the least a little bit over the top and a little bit too melodramatic. It's almost like he thinks he's slapping a gladiator on the ass before sending them out into the arena. Basically, the pimp says while Lulu is renting her the use of her body, he's gonna go have what he thinks will be his last Christmas dinner. This scene really slyly suggests that the little pimp has money in his pocket, whereas Alva and Lulu do not. Profits of Lulu selling her body. Some of the best explanation of this act of the film is actually from Louise Brooks herself in Lulu in Berlin, which is on YouTube. I recommend anyone who likes this film watch the interview with Louise Brooks and her explanations of these parts, which I think her explanations are the correct ones. And anyway, she notes that in choosing the casting, Pabst chose this actor that plays Jack the Ripper because Brooks found him attractive, and so they would have chemistry with each other in these scenes, which it actually works out exactly that way, which is another example of Pabst manipulating the actors in order to get the right reactions out of them. He doesn't leave it to chance. He creates the circumstances that will produce those actual responses, not relying on their acting ability. Louise Brooks's comments in the documentary really explain Lulu's hidden inner desires, and especially reveals that Lulu was really unwillingly involved in all these manipulations. And though it may have appeared that she enjoyed her life because it looked like at moments she was distracted by some pleasure, but in reality, Lulu isn't just a good dancer, she's a good actress. Really, she just wants escape. So not physically, but mentally, Lulu is a worn-out old whore by the age of 21. Anyway, this film version of the Pandora, of this story, of the play, is much much more favorable or much kinder to Lulu, when the truth is finally revealed, we actually see her as a sympathetic character, and though it may have appeared otherwise, she might have been the one who was psychologically suffering the most throughout this whole story. Whereas the other film version and the play, the way it's written is more like that Lulu is evil and gets what she deserves, where in this story, she's a real woman, not a cartoon character. Unlike the playwright, Pabst's sympathy is for Lulu. Pabst's film shows Lulu is the victim in this story, not the villain.